Balance and instincts. Just about every species follows these two concepts. One is more passive than the other, and the other is more of an active response. Ultimately, the aim of this is to survive, at least in the natural world. Balance is essentially maintaining an equilibrium, be it in a diet or within a society or community. For example, lions help keep the population of zebra down by eating them. Not enough zebra and not so many lion cubs will be born or will survive. Instincts are essentially some kind of pre-programming, providing a knowledge of what to do. Zebra know that they must run when they sense the presence of a stalking cat. A human baby cries at birth to open up its lungs and begin the process of breathing. Neither the zebra nor the baby have read a manual to know to do these things. You can also think of instincts as a gut feeling, and it's very interesting to learn that scientists and medics do believe that the gut of the human and potentially all species essentially is like a second brain. It is attached directly through the spinal cord and nerves to the brain, such that in literature was born the phrase the gut feeling. But essentially, if you have exam nerves or you're nervous about meeting somebody, you often feel that in your guts. To me, it feels like the sense of balance and instincts are things of the past. They're relics of human nature and Homo sapiens that we've forgotten. We've lost the art of mastering these concepts. So I want to introduce an idea, a word that covers that change when humans essentially moved beyond. And there isn't really a word that I know of that describes this. So I've come up with the idea where humans have now become influenced as mouvalt. It's actually a bit of Latin. It's the idea of moving on to something greater. Now, of course, this is where we perceive that we've moved on to something greater and that over time things have got better. But I'd like to argue that things haven't. Thus, the mouvalt period is a time where humans moved on from using their instincts and having a sense of balance. The words evolution and progress are often talked about in terms of society, where there's the idea that we've evolved or progressed, but they aren't necessarily positive things, where usually people assume that this is a positive step forward. Developed is also something used in line with progress, such as developed countries, but it isn't, again, necessarily a positive thing. Take these two examples, these two photos. The first shows problems with drugs and homeless people in a city in America. And then the second photo here shows homeless people in Cambodia. Note that in one of the photographs, people look a lot happier, but essentially the feel of each photo doesn't seem to show much difference. So it's surprising to note that the United Nations refers to one country as developed and the other underdeveloped. So my point here with this channel really is to talk about where we were, where we come from, what nurtured us back in time, and where we are now, and why things are going wrong. It feels like things are on a downward trend in society, as exemplified in the news and social media, as well as wars. And when you consider what history the world's had, we haven't learnt. We have not progressed in the way that we might think we have or that we might have hoped. Like with anything, I firmly believe there are exceptions to every rule. It does not mean you can't generalize, because generally there's a greater percentage that fits whatever scenario you're debating and proposing. But of course, where things are generally not great, there's always that upper echelon, tiny percentage of uber wealthy people, the billionaires, who sit on the top, potentially isolated from the problems of the world, who think everything is fine and we're all happy, thanks. Sadly, those people are probably also the people that are pulling the strings and running the world. But essentially, by and large, things aren't great. On top of that, many people might not feel that things are so bad or that they're struggling. But I would argue it's very much the human condition to go along with the flow. It's a degree of the path of least resistance, pulling your weight and just getting on with things. But ultimately, you're potentially masking all sorts of issues and not living a fulfilling and happy life. And essentially putting your head in the sand to those that really are struggling around you. Let's just take a look at the global health of human beings. Compared to the natural world, when you consider animals, we are not in a very good place. We're on a downward trend. You don't find obesity and cancer and the health issues that we face within the animal kingdom. Now, of course, I'm looking beyond those that we have domesticated. So typically cats and dogs, my cat died of cancer some many years ago. And there's a place I like to visit where the staff have a rather tubby dog. It's overly fed. The dog hasn't really caused that directly. Sure, indirectly through eating what it's been put in front of it. But ultimately, it's being fed too much and potentially the wrong kind of food. So, abstaining domesticated animals from poor health conditions, it's ultimately the human race that really are suffering. And when you consider where we were hundreds of years ago, even at the beginning of the 19th century, pre-Second World War, the state of human health was so much better. The amount of obesity in the various countries was way less, and the instances of cancer and various other ailments just weren't there back then. But it's exponentially increased over the last few decades. And then socially, it feels like things are getting to boiling point. I don't want to use the word crisis, but you look at the social platforms and what people are arguing about and debating, what's in the news, what's happening on our streets around the world. Things really are very negative. People are forming all sorts of new groups that never existed before and creating new identities and trying to redefine not just language, but the human race. And it's utterly confusing and I believe unnecessary. But that's all up for debate, and I'm open to discussion. But on the surface of it, it seems very much as sometimes people call it a first world problem. In this instance, are we so arrogant as humans that we're creating all these kind of issues that ultimately, in the grand scope of the planet and longevity, they're not important at all? Controversial, yes, of course. But we don't have these debates, then we don't understand things or each other or improve. Life is essentially out of balance, and we no longer hear our instincts and are instead led by commercial and industrial enterprises, told what to do, what to eat, what to drink, and we lap it up. Furthermore, Homo sapiens is populating further environments to such an extent that they cannot sustain or support them. So what's changed? I'm embarking on my own journey of health and change in response to some personal issues I have with my health, and covering skin concerns, sleep, fogginess, tiredness, and gut issues. In doing research, I stumbled upon this notion of balance and instinct, looking at the various medical articles online and watching various presentations from both amateurs and professionals, generally around the health and nutrition industry. What I found just wasn't clear-cut, but a host of conflicting evidence, views, and premature results of hasty tests. But there has to be a way forwards. So whatever has changed, I really don't think you can argue that it is progress. With global obesity rates and poor health, we are definitely on a downward trend. So I'm proposing to bring this out into the open and talk about it and look at the various ideas that I've found online in terms of health and diet and pick them apart and try and find essentially the instinctive and balanced approach to what's already on offer. Because at the moment, it seems no one thing is necessarily the answer. One size doesn't fit all. So I hope you join me on this journey as over the weeks we discuss these various ideas, and I will see you next time.